People always talk about the old Super Rugby being better. What is the difference, and was it actually better?
For me, it was better.
It was it?
Yeah, the major difference was if you look at the heyday of Super Rugby, it was 10 to 12 teams. So you had South Africa 3 teams.
Well, it was Super 12, wasn't it?
Super 10 to start.
It was Super 10 to start.
3 teams from South Africa, 2 teams from Australia, 5 teams from New Zealand.
Yeah.
And it was great because it was played over quite a short period of time. You had all the best players in the world because this was back in the day where, people weren't going to Europe.
No, true.
To play their rugby.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was frowned upon. Just why would you?
No.
Back in those days.
Yeah.
And then it moved to South Africa got an extra team, Australia got an extra team, and New Zealand had stayed with 5. And that was fantastic as well. Super 12s was awesome.
Yeah.
It was great. Massive crowds, had all the best players I mentioned, and the Northern Hemisphere at this time, their rugby was it was a joke. It was until World Cups.
Yeah.
It was just a joke, and all they did was kick the ball, boot the ball. Back in these days, the pitches in the
apart,
Northern Hemisphere were terrible.
Mud baths.
You had players who had played amateur rugby and still were really playing amateur rugby, whereas in New Zealand and Australia and South Africa,
But more professional.
a little bit more professional. The South Africans had been doing a few underhand tricks. New Zealand had been doing a few underhand tricks, and a lot of Australian players who played league or AFL had been getting paid, and they'd made the jump to rugby because it became professional.
Yeah. Massive crowds though.
Massive crowds.
Actually big crowds.
Yeah, big crowds. And we played under different rules to encourage our game to be this flowing game. And then the Northern Hemisphere have kind of joined in on those rules, most of those rules. So, but when you watch the Super Rugby game, it was completely different than watching a Premiership Rugby game.
Yeah.
It was chalk and cheese. You had some of the best players in the world. Then you were watching some people
Schoolboys.
really arguably shouldn't have been playing professional sport.
Yeah.
So it was better, and that was the big differences. Now, funnily, we could easily move back to a lot of those things. We could go to smaller groups of players, smaller teams. We could go back to 10 or 12.
Well, if they did that, that means that the pool of players, especially in South Africa and Australia, would be bigger for those few teams.
Absolutely.
Which would mean that those teams would be better.
That definitely mean the Australian and South African would have more money to throw at those teams as well. So that's one thing. If the World Club competition kicks in, then there's more money available to those clubs.
Yeah.
So then arguably players wouldn't feel the need to leave for more money.
Yeah, true.
So lots and lots to think about. But my worry is as I mentioned on the Twitter, there's been a lot of talking, but nothing's happened yet.
No.
So, everyone's talking, do New Zealand go it on their own with their own competition versus Australia and forget about South Africa? But they haven't done anything.
But I still think they need to keep the Super Rugby going. Southern Hemisphere, not just Aotearoa or with Australia. They need to keep that South African or those South African clubs in it because it's exciting playing the South African countries.
I think so as well. I absolutely agree with you.
And I love watching South Africans play rugby because they're bloody good at it.
You could very easily play in your conference, just in your conference, home and away.
Yeah.
And then go to a finals competition.
Well, then, the top 2 go through.
Yeah. So you play, top 6 competition, wouldn't you? 2 from each.
Well, you've got Super Rugby Aotearoa, you've got Super Rugby Australia, Super Rugby South Africa.
Yeah. And you could still have, you could still have Japan in there and Argentina in one of those.
Wildcard league.
Maybe.
You've got Uruguay.
You'd have a heck of a lot of travel though, wouldn't you? But yes, you could do that. And actually for the players going to, it would be a real disadvantage to Argentina or Japan or whatever because of the amount they would have to travel. But to the New Zealand teams or the Australian teams, it'd be great going away once or twice a year rather than going away for half the season would be a real pull for the players.
If Japan join the New Zealanders or even the Australians, they then go to that country for 4 weeks.
Play
Then
their
there's
games.
maybe a 2-week interlude, maybe
Oh,
international.
I've always liked a good interlude. You know,
Yeah,
when you used to
musical
go to
interlude.
you go to the cinema back in the day. Are you probably too young? You go to the cinema and halfway through the movie, they'd have an interlude.
Well, they just pause it, go for a
They
wee,
literally pause.
go
the
get some
video.
popcorn, go get a milkshake.
Absolutely. Now
Well, they
you're right,
could do
mate.
that. You
You're
know,
absolutely
maybe
right.
they have 3 weeks off, and you've got that international break.
Yeah, I'm a big
Or something
fan.
like that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of getting things over and done with. But you could literally play your competition,
I'm just thinking about
get to your finals, and then have your internationals, and then play your finals. You could do that. Yeah.
yeah.
So now that I think this is all good. If we were in charge, Tobes,
It'd be a shambles.
talking,
Anyway, mate, the
talking
quiz.
about a shambles,
The
let's go to the
quiz.
quiz. We're almost there,
I can't
listeners.
wait.
We're almost
I
near the
can't
end.
Wait, here we go. So, am I asking you first?
You are asking me first. This is how this works.
I
Now,
seem to always ask you though.